Towards the end of the novel, the reader is led to come to the poignant realization of the two characters, Rivers and Yeland. Barker's bountiful use of symbolism in the near to last chapters 21 and 22 contributes a lot to achieve this and give a compelling allegory of patriarch and parenthood. The chapter springs up in the setting of an electrical room, as the figurative definition of electric is to produce a sudden sense of intoxicating experience. This setting used in the chapter has the impression of volatility, as if to denote that things are about to change rapidly, perhaps even for the worst. As Barker willfully introduces the furnished backdrop, there is a small desk under the tall window. The small desk represents the controlled and defenseless soldiers, while the tall window represents the patriarchal figures who hold power over them. There is a stack of buff-colored files. The buff color, or in other words, the yellowish color in terms of non-literal interpretation, symbolizes cowardice. The files perhaps symbolize the persistence or determination of Yeland and his work. This gives the impression that the vulnerable and fearful soldiers are being held sway over by the resolute and never-ending commanding powers of the officers. There is the patient's chair rather than a dentist's chair. The simile, like a dentist's chair, denotes the fact that the patient is being treated like a child, which relates to the patriarchal society at the time. The soldiers are regarded as children. Regarding Rivers' patients, they are being looked after, nursed, and tended to. In fact, Rivers acts more like a babysitter than a neurosis doctor, as he was compared to a male mother by his patients. However, while at the same time, when it comes to Yeland, they have to face punishments, disciplines, rebukes, and even harsh castigations. Then there are the straps on the arms and around the footrest, which Yeland fastened around Callan's wrists and feet. These are symbolic as they associate with the straps on the soldiers' uniforms. They symbolize the restrictions at the parental figures put up to keep the soldiers within bounds. The blinds were the thick, efficient blinds of wartime. These represent hindrance, or rather, a barrier that inhibits the soldiers' freedom and liberation. The blinds also symbolize the hidebound and conservative society during World War I. Yeland closes down the blinds, perhaps having the only purpose of being concealed and private in mind. This is almost threatening, as it denotes how Yeland is going to do things that he wouldn't want anyone else to see to his patient. Then in the room, there's not a chink of light. There's darkness, except for a small circle of light around the battery. Once again, this denotes concealment. The darkness also signifies imperceptivity, meaning it's impossible for Callan to perceive what's about to happen. The circle of light around the battery perhaps symbolizes the obscure and weak flicker of hope to be cured on Callan's part. Yeland's white coat is the symbol of the dominant role of Yeland and his position of power and authority, whereas the pad electrode and the long pharyngeal electrode represent infliction of treatment and pain, or rather the acts of torture that the patriarch presses onto the soldiers. In the next chapter, um, Barker zooms in on Rivers instead of Yealand. The paper and typewriter symbolize Rivers' immense commitment and hard work, once again relating to the fact that he is the protagonist of the novel as a whole. In his room, the armchair, the fire, the bed also denote the sources of comfort, warmth, and consolation, while the details of Rivers sweating with a slight temperature, pulses all over his body, throbbing, his heart pounding. These are oxymorons which contradict to the aforementioned symbols of consolation, as they represent Rivers' disastrous state. The simile, like specks in the eye, symbolizes sense and intellect, as the specks represent wisdom. The simile is indicating how Rivers' mind and intellectual power are being affected by the incidents that he has witnessed and is being haunted by. Um, the haunting images, the hallucination, the palpitations, breathlessness, and the slight temperature all contribute to somewhat a foreshadow of a downfall of Rivers. So the readers are being given an outlook on how the chapter is going to end up. Then there is the tongue depressor. This is the position of power and authority, or rather Rivers' role as a patriarchal figure. Then Barker zooms in the horse's bit, not an electrode, not a teaspoon, a bit, an instrument of control. There's the notable use of parallelism, where Barker reminds us of the episode that has taken place earlier in the novel, in which Rivers has used a teaspoon to try and cure Pryor's case of mutism. The train of thought Rivers launches in. Obviously, he and Yealand were both in the business of controlling people. Each of them fitted young men back into the role of warrior, the role they had, however, unconsciously rejected, and so forth. This perhaps is the climax, where there is an internal conflict within Rivers. It's perhaps the tragic turn of the novel, where he finally comes to realization of the fact that, just like Yealand, he is prodding the soldiers to hastily go back to war. It raises the question, does the difference between the methods of control of Rivers and Yealand matter when their roles are the same? So to conclude, in these two chapters, Barker has successfully used figurative languages and symbolism to highlight the allegory of parenthood in her novel, while conveying the characterization of Rivers and Yealand.